At the start of the film, Mona gets up from the bed, puts on her gown, and steps outside. She goes to another room, plays music, and gazes out from the balcony. The next day, Mona conducts her dance class and asks her friend to bring a dumbbell. Feeling thirsty, she tells her assistant she's going for water. On her way, she notices a couple arguing. The woman tells her boyfriend to stay away, which angers him. However, she stops him. Seeing this, Mona walks away. Later, Michael takes an elevator, but realizes he got off on the wrong floor. A girl informs him that his flat is upstairs, so he uses the stairs. Entering his room, he calls out for Mona, who is on the balcony. They prepare dinner together, and Michael lights candles on the terrace. Mona joins him and gifts him a locket. She puts it around his neck, and they kiss. Suddenly, it starts raining. Mona rushes to save the dinner, but accidentally drops it. She returns to the room. The following day, Mona takes her dog for a walk, reminiscing about the previous night's events. Feeling excited, she heads back with her dog, but meets Marisha on the way. Marisha expresses her desire to get a dog like Mona's, and they walk together. Mona then returns to her building and finds Michael arranging a table. She hands her dog to the guard and leaves. In the next scene, Mona is conducting her dance class when she is informed of a call from her husband. Michael tells her they need to attend a party that night. Mona gets ready, and after the party, they return home. Mona removes her sandals, and they discuss the food at the party. Their dog comes running in, and Michael mentions a match airing on TV, explaining why he left the party early. He asks Mona to take the dog for a walk. Although reluctant due to the late hour, she agrees. While walking, and Mona picks him up to continue. As she walks, to her surprise, it's Marisha with her boyfriend. After this, Marisha gets scared, gets out of the car, and starts running. Her boyfriend follows her. Mona watches them from there. Marisha's boyfriend approaches Mona and tells her that it is her fault that Marisha ran away. He then says that Mona is beautiful. Mona runs away from there and enters her building, but Marisha's boyfriend follows her inside. He continues chasing Mona, and when she goes inside a room, after this, their love game begins. She then gets up and moves to the bed, where she asks Michael if he loves her. Michael says yes, and she asks him to promise that he will never cheat on her. In the changing room, Rumi enters and offers Mona coffee, which Mona declines. Rumi asks if Mona has broken up with her husband, and they begin talking about Michael. Rumi says that Michael is cheating on her, but Mona responds by saying that she has cheated on Michael. She explains that yesterday, she was with another man, and he ignited a fire inside her. Mona says that until now, the people she loved were nothing compared to the one from yesterday. Rumi says she thinks Mona has gone crazy, but Mona laughs and says she was joking. She insists that there is no one in her life other than Michael. Later, Mona and Michael are driving when Mona suddenly stops the car in a forest. Michael asks why she stopped the car, and Mona says that after a long time, she feels like making love to him in the car. She reminds him that before they got married, he used to come pick her up in the car, and they used to make love there. Michael says that he would rather show her love at home, where no one will see them. Hearing this, Mona gets upset and moves to the other side of the car. After this, they both go to a restaurant where Michael talks about his work. Mona starts getting bored, and just then, she notices a man staring at her. Mona also looks at him, and then a woman starts singing a song. Michael and Mona enjoy the song, and Michael kisses Mona and takes her to a racing event. Michael meets the owner of the remote control car, while Mona walks away to another area where some people are doing a shoot. The man from the restaurant is also there. Mona attracts the man, who fills his gun with bullets and gestures at her. He then fires a shot and sees Mona heading toward the restroom. After Mona enters the restroom, the man follows her. Michael and Mona drive back home in their car. Later, Mona is at her dance class, where she is performing for a shoot. Her boss compliments her and offers her a role in a shoot. Mona refuses and leaves. As she drives home, it starts raining, and she stops her car outside her house. Suddenly, a director gets into her car and confesses that he hasn't been able to since he first saw her. Mona asks him to leave the car, telling him not to bother her. The director steps out of the car, but takes her umbrella. When Mona reaches out to take it back, he kisses her hand. Annoyed, she heads to her room. Shortly after, Michael arrives home, looking exhausted. Mona massages his head. Startled, Mona runs to another room and locks the door. Michael tries to get her to open the door, but Mona stays inside, feeling overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Michael removes his pants and starts reading a magazine. Seeing this, Mona opens the door. He asks for her permission to join her. Initially, she refuses, but eventually, they both share a romantic moment in the pool. In the next scene, Mona is preparing breakfast when the phone rings. She answers it and finds the director on the other end. He tells her that he knows she's alone and insists on meeting her. Frustrated, Mona tells him to leave her alone and hangs up. When the phone rings again, she goes to the terrace to check if the director is outside, but doesn't see him. She drinks to calm herself down, but then the doorbell rings. Mona doesn't open the door, and when the the ringing stops, she finds the director outside, holding a gift for her. She shuts the door in his face. Meanwhile, Michael is playing a game while Mona sets up dinner. Michael tells her that a new friend is coming over, and Mona assumes it's a surprise party since she doesn't know the guest. Michael reveals that his friend's name is Sojati and that he's a director. Alarmed, Mona insists that Sojati shouldn't come over, but soon, the doorbell rings, and Sojati arrives with his wife, Valoria. Sojati asks for Mona's name, and she introduces herself. He gives her the same gift he had tried to give her earlier. Valoria starts playing a game with Michael, who joins her. Michael then makes drinks for everyone. Sojati tries to make small talk with Mona, asking what she does. Mona doesn't respond, so Michael mentions that she teaches dance classes. Feeling upset, Mona heads to the kitchen to get some ice. At that moment, Mona and Valoria start modeling with books balanced on their heads. Michael and Sojati watch them. The book falls from Mona's head, and Valoria declares herself the winner. Mona sits next to Michael and begins drinking. When Michael gets up to prepare a drink, Valoria follows him. Meanwhile, Mona starts arranging the books. Sojati begins talking about a painting there. He mentions that he likes the painting, and Mona explains that it was brought from India by a friend of her husband. Sojati then places Mona's hand on his shoulder. At this moment, Valoria calls them, and both Mona and Sojati join her. The four of them go out for a stroll. Valoria orders coffee. Mona leaves and goes behind the restaurant. Sojati follows her, and the two end up expressing their affection for each other. Just then, Michael arrives and sees them. Sojati attempts to flee, but Michael chases and beats him up. Mona tries to intervene, but Michael, in his anger, declares that he never wants to see Mona in his life again. He then sits on a bench nearby. Morning arrives, and we see Michael and Mona still sitting at the same spot. Mona gets up and leaves while Michael watches her. Elsewhere, Rumi suggests Mona take a dance class. Mona declines, saying she's not in the mood. Rumi insists, saying Mona has been in the room for a week and is feeling guilty for not being able to help her. Mona regrets her actions and admits she betrayed Michael. Rumi assures her that Michael will return for her, as she knows him well. Just then, Michael calls. Rumi answers and hands the phone to Mona, but Michael does not speak to her. Meanwhile, Misha and Michael are talking. Misha invites Michael to dinner. Later, Mona attends her dance class. After class, she reads a magazine at home when Rumi arrives with a black dress, asking Mona to wear it. Mona refuses, saying she's not in the mood. Rumi insists, as she wants to take Mona to the theater. Rumi then shares details about her boyfriend, George. Eventually, they both reach the theater. At that moment, a man comes who is Rumi's friend. After that, Mona is walking on Mona Road eating a burger when a car arrives. Jonathan is sitting in the car. Mona runs away from there. Afterwards, Mona takes a taxi and arrives at Michael's house. Michael was giving water to Marisha when Mona tries to open the door, but it doesn't open. Mona's dog starts barking at the door. Then both of them come to the door. Marisha says she is going home. Upon hearing this, Mona hides on the stairs. Michael tells her to sleep with him, but Marisha says she has an exam tomorrow and needs to prepare, so she leaves. Michael also closes the door, and Mona leaves as well. Michael drinks, and then thinks of going to pick up Mona. He drives to Rumi's house. Mona is sitting on a chair in front of the house. Michael sees her, and Mona says that she is waiting for Rumi. Michael tells her that it's dangerous to be out at night. Mona responds by saying, "Why didn't you think of that when you kicked me out of the house?" Michael says he came to pick her up, but Mona tells him to stay with Marisha as she is young. Michael gets angry, reverses the car, and stops. Then, Rumi gets out of another car, and both of them enter the building. Michael also leaves from there. Meanwhile, Julio, who is with Mona, tells her about his work. Mona asks if he likes it, and Julio replies, "I heard that you broke up with your husband, but now you're free." After that, Julio brings Mona to his office, and she goes to another room. The next day, Michael meets Mona and asks her to come back, but Mona doesn't want to return, so she refuses. Michael says, "I think you're bathing in the pond every day." Mona doesn't respond and leaves from there. The next day, Mona arrives at Julio's chamber. Later, Mona returns home, but someone follows her. She runs into her house. While sobbing, Mona finds Michael's locket on the ground. The following day, Mona visits Michael's house. She places the locket around Michael's neck and asks him to change his clothes. The two share drinks, and once again, they engage in a passionate encounter. After this, the film concludes.